Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Sonnenstein, and I'm one of the co-founders of Shadowproof, and I'm joined by my colleague, Kevin Gosztola. How you doing, Kevin?
Hey, Brian.
I'm here today to make a very exciting announcement, and that is that Kevin will be going to Augusta, Georgia in March to cover Reality Winner's trial. And Reality Winner is an NSA whistleblower, the first whistleblower prosecution under Donald Trump. And I'm here today to talk to Kevin about the case, about why he's going, why he thinks it's important, and get his thoughts on it. So thank you very much for talking to me, Kevin. Before I dive in, I wanted to encourage people to check out an article that Kevin just posted about Reality Winner's case and where it fits in with other Espionage Act prosecutions. It's on Shadowproof right now, and the article is called "The Espionage Act and NSA Whistleblower Reality Winner's Uphill Struggle to Defend Herself." So, Kevin, for people who maybe haven't been following this case all that closely, can you just sum it up for a little bit? Who Reality Winner is, and why she's being charged with Espionage Act offenses?
Yeah, so thanks. And I suppose just from the outset, we should be clear that there's always the potential in these cases that there would be some kind of a plea deal. There's a lot of pressure, particularly when you're looking at the defense teams and Reality Winner individually. And we know this from Chelsea Manning's case. We know this from other leak cases or leak prosecutions, that people who even have the best whistleblower motives see that there's just no way they can defend themselves in a court of law. And so they take the best possible deal, which is usually like 1 to 2 years in jail, and forego any kind of a trial. So it's also possible that coming up here in March, when this trial is scheduled, that we'll find out that they're going to just accept some kind of agreement if there's an offer on the table. At this point, her defense is fighting very fiercely. And so Reality Winner is a NSA contractor. She's in jail. She's been in pretrial detention since early June, when she was arrested on June 3rd. Several FBI agents came to her house in Augusta, Georgia, and she was arrested 2 hours later. She was put through an interrogation, and it all stemmed from the fact that she was accused of releasing a top secret intelligence report on Russian hacking against the election infrastructure during the 2016 election. This was compiled based on intelligence that the NSA had related to them trying to figure out what happened as far as interference goes. And according to Reality Winner, although these statements are ones that she's trying to have suppressed in a court of law so that they can't be used against her, what she told FBI agents, according to a transcript, is that she wanted this to be out there and part of the conversation. I'm paraphrasing, but she wanted to have this out there to be part of the discussion about alleged Russian interference in the election. She saw this report and she wondered why it was not part of any news reports. And to her knowledge, she did not feel like she was compromising any sources or methods. And that's important because, it speaks to whether she was doing something that would damage the United States. And she believed that we were already talking about things of this nature in our wide conversations about allegations against Russia. And so this just needed to be part of her conversation because of what we wanted to know about where things are at with Donald Trump and how deep his ties go to anything he would have done that was not right. We still have Robert Mueller investigating people within his team. And so it just, in Reality Winner's mind, she was curious why this wasn't part of a larger conversation.
So what stands out to you about this case? I'm wondering if you can compare and contrast it briefly with some other of the Espionage Act prosecutions we've seen over the past decade. And in addition to that, I'm wondering if you tell us why you feel motivated to go and cover it.
What stands out about this case is it's the first major leak prosecution under President Donald Trump. And so we get to see what kind of a prosecution he plans to bring against leakers, and how far his administration is willing to go in order to make sure that people like Reality Winner, who appear to have whistleblower motives, serve jail time simply for allegedly providing a document to a media outlet. And this report was published by The Intercept. And so I think that what's remarkable about this case is that they're going to go to great lengths to foreclose any possibility of her to bring in motive, bring in knowledge, bring in anything additional that could help her exonerate herself or show before a jury that what she was doing was not intended to damage the national security of the United States, and that in fact, she was not behaving like a spy, or she was not behaving like a reckless individual. She had very clear understanding of what was in this document, and if she actually is the person who released it, her defense would like to be able to argue that she is a whistleblower and that there was a legitimate motivation for passing this on to a media outlet. On the other hand, what you have with Donald Trump's administration, with the Justice Department, you have the fact that they're going to do everything they can to make this into just a strict liability offense. And what I mean by that is all they have to show is that a transaction happened, that a disclosure went from Reality Winner. Did she mail it? Okay, she mailed the document to The Intercept. The Intercept received a copy of this report. She signed a non-disclosure agreement. She understood that this information was classified. It doesn't matter if the contents of the document were already partially known to the public, or if parts of it were already out in the public. It doesn't matter, because she should have known that she shouldn't release classified information. And then that's all they feel they need to present before a jury. And that's all they feel that a jury would need to convict her of violating the Espionage Act, which is, for people who are not fully aware, a 1917 law, a law that goes all the way back to the 1910s, was very much used to go after dissenters. That's what we've seen going on with the government in the past 10 to 15 years, is that they're wielding this against people for leaks. It was never particularly intended to go after leakers, but it's a tool that they've been using like a sledgehammer to go after people who release information to the public. And so why do I think I should go to Augusta, Georgia? Why do I think I should be there to cover this trial? Is because it's a natural extension of a lot of the work that I've done covering cases like Chelsea Manning, covering cases like CIA officer John Kiriakou, who went to prison, who we published and followed how he was treated while he was in prison at Loretto, publishing the letters from Loretto. It's part of looking at the way in which the government goes after people who are just trying to give us an insight into what our government is doing. And in a very, very small way, Reality Winner wanted to color and add to our conversation about alleged Russian interference in the 2016 election, which we hear about nonstop when you turn into CNN. And to think that somebody is possibly going to go to jail for a year to 2 years because they found something alarming and they wanted it to be part of the conversation, it just speaks to an abuse of power. And it also should refocus our attention on the way in which Donald Trump and his administration and even President Obama's administration would go to great lengths to protect government secrecy and target whistleblowers who decided to provide some additional truths to us so that we could have an idea about what our government is really doing behind closed doors.
Yeah, and I know that, part of the way that we got to know each other and a lot of your excellent reporting over the last few years has focused on whistleblowers, and particularly your coverage of the Chelsea Manning trial. For people who are not familiar with your work, Kevin was one of the only journalists to attend the entirety of Chelsea Manning's trial and report on it at Firedog Lake, which was the website that came before Shadowproof. And, he's covered a lot of other whistleblower cases very closely. And I guess my question for you, and I think you touched on it a little bit there, but I was wondering if you could go into it more, is, from your experience of covering these kinds of cases, what kinds of lessons do you bring with you? What kinds of things are you looking for in the case, if there's anything that you can point out? And then in addition to that, why is it important to have an independent journalist such as yourself in the courtroom instead of, let's just say, like leaving it up to the New York Times to cover this? Why is it important that we have you there?
The lessons from the prior cases is that the government's going to have a lot of ability to pursue this case in the way in which it wants. And it's important for us to be there to show the lengths that they're willing to go in order to put somebody in prison for what's a very small, minor offense. And in fact, I would remind people that 10 to 15 years ago, this may have been something that was handled administratively, and we didn't hear a lot about it. Someone in the NSA might release a document, and it would be published by a media organization, but they would only face maybe a small repercussion, maybe a fine, maybe a suspension for a couple of weeks at their job. But they wouldn't be necessarily put in jail for 2 to 3 years, especially for just a single document. And we're talking about, in this case, one report, and it could potentially land her in prison for 1 to 2 years. And so I think it's important to be there. And part of what I intend to act upon after covering cases the court-martial at Fort Meade, it's not going to be as intense or as restricting as it was there. I don't expect to have somebody in military uniform with a rifle leering over me during the final weeks of a trial, but I do expect that we're going to have to jump through some hoops in order to get access to the courthouse on a daily basis. There's going to need to be some proactive steps that are taken, and it's I'm going to need to make sure I can show that people are interested in the kind of reporting that I'm going to put out, and part of doing this right now is to ensure that people are going to be following what we do in March, so that I can, one, make sure that the courthouse allows access to a journalist, an independent journalist, someone who's with a small outlet. We're not CNN, we're not New York Times, so the people who run the courthouse aren't going to know who we are. And so we're going to need to prove that we are a media organization that deserves to be in that courthouse, sitting along with all other media, and including other outlets like the Huffington Post or even The Intercept. Expect would probably send a reporter of their own. And so all of those things that I learned from Chelsea Manning's trial come into play here in making sure that I can assert myself and stand my ground in the courthouse and make it clear that I have a right to be there to cover this trial as much as anybody else. And the perspective that I have to bring to covering Reality Winner's trial, which I expect would probably be somewhere around a week to 2 weeks. I don't expect it to take that long, but the perspective that I would bring is drawing from all kinds of coverage that I've done of the record number of leakers that were prosecuted by President Barack Obama, knowing each of their cases, knowing people like even the lesser known ones, which if you go read the report that I just put up, we talk about Stephen Kim, who's a former State Department employee. And without getting into his case, the judge did lower the burden for people who are being prosecuted under the Espionage Act, making it easier for the government to make a case against him. And eventually that ended in a plea deal where he did some time in prison. And so knowing those kinds of cases that bigger media, the New York Times, Washington Post, etc., maybe they're not going to know all of these different intricacies around the law. That's going to be important to bring in there. But then also knowing the humanity of Reality Winner, knowing that what she intended to do was not malicious, and keeping that in mind, and thinking about discretion and abuse of power. That's necessarily not what you're going to get through standard objective, so-called objective coverage of Reality Winner. And I think it's important to keep it in mind that not that she doesn't necessarily deserve to be in prison, and to approach the trial from that perspective can be tremendously powerful in giving people a glimpse of what is exactly going on inside of the courtroom.
So the last thing that I just want to talk about with you quickly, and get your thoughts on, and just remind people, is that like all of our reporting projects at Shadowproof, our major reporting projects, and like your coverage of the Chelsea Manning trial, this will be a community effort. It's going to take a village to send you there and to sustain your reporting. And I just wanted, in encouraging people to support this work and donate what they can to send you to cover this trial, I was just wondering if you could quickly give people an idea of what their money will be used for, just so that they can understand what goes into doing something like this and why we really need people to back us up.
Yeah, I'm not looking for a plush, luxurious setting to help me get in touch with my artistic, creative self and bring you the best Reality Winner coverage, and set some kind of a standard as some prima donna who's capable of showing you a trial. I am going to we need the funds for a flight. We need the funds for a cheaper hotel room, which we've managed to find a place not too far from the courthouse. So that limits the transportation that will be necessary throughout the week. We need the funds to help pay for basic food, nourishment, so that I don't lose all my energy and find myself incapable of giving you the daily reports that I hope you're going to enjoy reading about what's happening. It can be a grueling and intense kind of a day, depending on how many dispatches I attempt to put out, whether they're a combination of video and writing. It doesn't matter. Those can be, from my experience covering Chelsea Manning's court-martial, those can be very intense, and and so your funds will make it possible for me to diligently stay on top of covering all the biggest and most important, but even the lesser known aspects, the ones that the aspects of it that perhaps CNN or the New York Times have overlooked, and we don't actually know if they're going to be there every day. Part of your funds will ensure that we're there every day for the trial, because it's possible that these major media organizations show up for opening arguments, and then they're there for the second day to see some of the evidence that's presented, and then they slink back and they don't show up again until there's closing arguments, and then they're ready to hear if the jury's going to convict Reality Winner or not. And so your funds will ensure that we're there for the duration of the trial, and that we can cover it from start to end, and that I won't be completely burned out. That that I have funds in order to keep my energy up and keep these reports coming to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. I encourage people to once again check out his article on Shadowproof. It's titled "The Espionage Act and NSA Whistleblower Reality Winner's Uphill Struggle to Defend Herself." As we said in the beginning of this, the trial, if it does proceed, will begin on March 19th in Augusta, Georgia. For people who want to support this, you can find a link below or go to shadowproof.com/donate. And there's a variety of options there. Whatever you can give to support this project, we greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much, Kevin, and I look forward to your reporting.
Thanks, Brian.